My grandmother died on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, my mother was already measuring the living room for new curtains. Not for grief. For the open house. My name is Sienna Cole. I'm 28 years old. I work as a financial analyst in Nashville, and I am the granddaughter who learned that silence is not weakness. It is preparation. They showed up 3 weeks ago. All of them. My mother, my stepfather Rick, and my older sister Jade. They pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex in Rick's oversized black truck, the one he bought on credit 2 years ago, convinced that Grandma Lena's farmland would eventually cover the payments. My mother was carrying a Tupperware container of her banana pudding, the one she only makes when she wants something. Rick had his business smile on, the one he wears at church and at car dealerships. Jade was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up, but I knew she was the most dangerous one in the group. She always was. "We just want to sit down and talk about Mama Lena's property," my mother said at the door, her voice coated in that sugary tone she uses when she's about to lie. "It's been over a year now, Sienna. We need to move forward as a family." A family. She said that word like it meant something to her. I let them in. I offered them water. I sat across from them in my small kitchen and let them talk. They had rehearsed this. I could tell because Rick kept glancing at my mother for cues, and Jade had her arms crossed in that way she does when she's trying to look like the reasonable one. They talked for 20 minutes. About developers, about the value of the land, about how the property taxes were bleeding them dry, about how a quick, clean sale would benefit everyone. They had no idea that I had already made my decision 6 months ago, and the papers were already filed, but they weren't the papers they were expecting. Before I get into what happened, go ahead and like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to where this all started. Grandma Lena raised me. That's the truth that my mother has spent her whole life trying to rewrite, but it's the truth. When I was 7, my parents divorced. My father moved to Arizona and became a stranger. My mother remarried Rick within a year, and suddenly I was in the way. Jade was older by 4 years, already molded into my mother's image, already fluent in her language of appearances and social currency. But I was the quiet one, the difficult one, the one who asked too many questions and didn't smile enough at dinner parties. So they sent me to Grandma Lena's farm for the summers. Then the summers turned into school years. Then the school years turned into my entire childhood. By the time I was 12, I was living with my grandmother full-time, and my mother acted like it was my idea. That farm was everything. 160 acres of Tennessee hill country, about 40 minutes south of Knoxville. Rolling green pastures, a creek that ran cold even in August, a red barn that leaned a little to the left, and a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch where Grandma Lena and I would sit every evening and watch the fireflies come out. She taught me everything. How to keep books, how to manage expenses, how to talk to the bank. She ran that farm by herself after Grandpa Harold died in 2006, and she ran it well. She leased pasture land to neighboring cattle ranchers. She rented the barn for events. She grew vegetables and sold them at the farmer's market every Saturday. That land wasn't just property. It was a living, breathing operation that she had poured 40 years of her life into. The whole thing was worth about $2.5 million by the time she passed. The land alone was valued at nearly $2 million, with the house, the barn, and the equipment making up the rest. And my mother wanted to sell every last acre of it to a housing developer named Greg Kessler, who wanted to bulldoze the farmhouse and build a subdivision called Emerald Creek Estates. I found out about Kessler at Grandma Lena's funeral. Not from my mother directly. From overhearing her on the phone in the church parking lot 20 minutes before the service started. She was leaning against the car, laughing softly into her phone, and I caught the tail end of it. "Greg, I hear you. We just need to get through the next few weeks and let the dust settle. Then we'll move on the property. Trust me, it's a done deal." She hung up and saw me standing there. Her face flickered, just for a second, and then she smiled. That wide, bright, completely hollow smile. "Oh, honey, I was just talking to a friend. You okay? You look pale." I wasn't pale. I was vibrating with something I didn't have a name for yet. Something between rage and heartbreak. My grandmother's body was inside that church, surrounded by lilies and hymns, and my mother was already on the phone with the developer. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked inside. I sat in the front pew and stared at the closed casket and made a silent promise to a woman who had given me everything. "They won't touch it, Grandma." I swear. After the funeral, things moved fast. My mother and Rick started talking about the property like it was already theirs. They came out to the farm one weekend, walked the land with a surveyor, and started talking about lot divisions and drainage plans. They didn't ask me to come. I found out from a neighbor, Mr. Aldridge, who called me confused. "Your mama's out here with some men in hard hats," he said. "They're putting stakes in the ground near the south pasture. You know anything about this?" I didn't, but I was about to find out everything. I drove down that same weekend. When I got to the farm, I found orange survey flags dotting the hillside like little neon wounds. They had already started carving it up. In their minds, it was done. But Grandma Lena was sharper than any of them ever gave her credit for. I spent that weekend going through her office, a small room off the kitchen that smelled like cedar and old paper. I opened the fireproof safe she kept under the desk, the one she had shown me the combination to when I was 16. Inside, I found everything. Her will, yes, but also something else, a living trust, drafted and notarized 3 years before she died, with the help of an estate attorney in Knoxville named David Calloway. The trust was revocable during her lifetime, but upon her death it became irrevocable, and the terms were crystal clear. The farm, the house, all 160 acres, and every asset tied to the property were to be held in trust for the purpose of community agricultural education, local scholarships for first-generation college students, and preservation of the land in its current use. The trust explicitly prohibited any sale, subdivision, or commercial development of the property. And the sole trustee was me, Sienna Cole. There was a handwritten letter clipped to the front page. Grandma Lena's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. "Sienna, you're the only one who understands what this place means. Don't let them turn it into something it was never meant to be. I trust you because you earned it. Love always, Grandma." I sat on the floor of that little office and cried until I couldn't breathe. Not because I was sad, though I was, because she had known. She had seen them coming. She had seen her own daughter's greed years before it fully revealed itself, and she had quietly, methodically, legally made sure it wouldn't win. I called David Calloway the next morning. He confirmed everything. The trust was airtight. He had helped Grandma Lena set it up specifically because she was worried about what would happen to the farm after she was gone. She never told my mother. She never told Rick. She never told Rick. She never told Jade. She told no one except me. And even then, she let the documents speak for themselves. "She wanted you to find them when the time was right," Calloway told me. "She said you'd know what to do." And I did. For the next 6 months, I said nothing. I let my mother and Rick and Jade operate in their fantasy. They hired a real estate attorney. They contacted Kessler's development company. They started spending money they didn't have. Rick put a deposit on a bass boat. Jade rented a more expensive apartment, telling her friends she was about to come into some money. My mother booked a cruise for February. They called me occasionally, always with the same question wrapped in different packaging. "Have you heard anything from the lawyers about the estate? Is there any holdup? Do we need to sign anything?" I gave them nothing, just vague professional answers. "These things take time, Mom. The probate process is complicated. I'm staying on top of it." Each time she would huff or sigh, but she never pushed too hard, because she still saw me as the quiet one, the compliant one, the girl who would do what she was told. Meanwhile, I was working with Calloway to formalize the trust's operations. We established a small board of trustees, 5 people. Myself, Calloway, Mr. Aldridge the neighbor, a retired agriculture professor from the University of Tennessee, and a local high school principal. We drafted the scholarship criteria. We partnered with the County Extension Office for agricultural education programs. We even got a small matching grant from a state conservation fund. The farm itself came back to life. I drove down every other weekend and worked the land myself. I fixed fences. I cleared brush from the creek bed. I replanted Grandma Lena's herb garden along the south side of the house. The barn got a new roof, paid for out of the trust's operating fund, which was seeded by the lease income from the pasture land that Grandma had been collecting for years. It felt like breathing again. Every nail I hammered, every post I set, Every row I weeded was a conversation with her. I could feel her there. In the red dirt under my fingernails, in the way the evening light hit the ridgeline. But I knew the storm was coming. It came on a Sunday, 3 weeks ago, in my kitchen, with banana pudding and business smiles. They had found out. Not from me. From Kessler's office. His people had run a title search on the property and discovered that ownership had been transferred to something called the Lena Cole Agricultural Trust. Kessler called Rick and told him the deal was dead. The property was locked up in a trust and couldn't be sold. Rick was the first to speak after they sat down that Sunday. "Sienna," he said, his voice tight and controlled. "There seems to be some kind of mix-up with the property records. We ran into a snag with the buyer. Something about a trust?" I looked at him, then at my mother, then at Jade. Their faces were a study in barely contained panic, dressed up as confusion. "It's not a mix-up," I said. My mother blinked. "What do you mean?" I reached into the drawer of my kitchen table and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of the trust documents. I slid them across the table. "Grandma Lena set up a living trust 3 years before she passed," I said. "The farm, the house, and all the land are held in that trust. It became irrevocable when she died. The property can't be sold, can't be developed, and can't be subdivided. It's designated for agricultural education and community scholarships. Permanently." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. My mother picked up the papers. Her hands were trembling. She read the first page, then flipped to the second, then back to the first, as if rereading it would change the words. "This can't be right," she whispered. "Mama wouldn't do this." "She did," I said. "She had an attorney draft it. She signed it in front of a notary. She filed it with the county. It's completely legal." Rick snatched the papers from my mother. His face was going red, starting at the neck and creeping upward like a thermometer. He read through it, his jaw working, his breathing getting heavier. "And you knew about this?" he said, his voice rising. "You knew about this the whole time, and you just sat there and watched us spend money and make plans, and you said nothing?" I looked at him calmly. "You never asked me, Rick. You told me. You told me you were going to sell Grandma's farm and split the money and build a subdivision on land that's been in my family for 3 generations. You never once asked me what I thought. You never once asked what Grandma wanted." Jade finally spoke. Her voice was cold, clipped, surgical. She had already moved past the shock and into strategy mode. "We can contest this," she said, looking at Rick, not at me. "If she was mentally declining when she signed it, if there's any evidence of undue influence, we can break the trust." "She wasn't declining," I said, "and there was no undue influence. She made this decision on her own, with her own attorney, while she was in perfect health. I have her medical records and the attorney's notes to prove it." She paused just long enough for her to try to think of a response. "Callaway is prepared to defend the trust in court if necessary. So is the State Conservation Office, which has already recognized the trust as a qualified charitable entity." Jade's face went tight. She wasn't used to losing arguments. My mother started crying then, not quiet tears, the loud heaving kind that she always used when she wanted sympathy. She put her face in her hands and let out a sound that was half sob, half accusation. "How could you do this to me, Sienna?" she wailed. "I'm her daughter. I'm her only child. That property should have come to me. It's my birthright." I looked at her. I looked at this woman who sent me to live with her own mother because I was inconvenient, who visited twice a year at most, who never once helped with the farm, never once sat with Grandma during a doctor's appointment, never once asked how the books were looking or whether the fences needed mending, who showed up at the funeral already on the phone with a developer. And I said the thing I had been carrying for over a year. "You gave me away when I was 7 years old, Mom. You sent me to live with Grandma because I didn't fit into your new life with Rick and Jade. You dropped me off with a suitcase and drove away, and Grandma was the one who raised me. She fed me. She taught me. She held me when I cried at night because I missed you. She did everything you were supposed to do. So don't sit here and tell me about birthright. You gave yours up the day you gave me up." The room went dead silent. Even Rick stopped puffing. My mother stared at me, her mascara running, her mouth open, and for the first time in my life, she had nothing to say. Jade tried one more time. "This isn't over," she said, standing up and grabbing her purse. "We're going to get a lawyer, a real one, and we're going to fight this." "You can try," I said, but the trust was set up by a licensed estate attorney with 30 years of experience. It was filed correctly, funded correctly, and executed correctly. It's irrevocable. That means no one, not me, not you, not a judge, can undo it. The property belongs to the trust now, not to any person. Jade's jaw tightened. She looked at my mother, then at Rick, then back at me. And for the first time, I saw something behind her anger. It was fear. The fear of someone who had already spent money she didn't have. Based on a future that no longer existed, they left without another word. My mother took her banana pudding with her. Rick slammed the door hard enough to rattle the picture frames on the wall. Jade didn't look back. I stood in my kitchen alone, listening to the truck engine fade down the street, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt light. The next morning, I drove to the farm. It was early October, and the hills were on fire with color. Orange and red and gold spreading across the ridge lines like the land itself was celebrating. The air was sharp and clean, carrying the smell of damp earth and wood smoke from somewhere down the valley. I pulled into the gravel drive. The white farmhouse sat exactly where it had always sat, solid and patient against the Tennessee sky. The sign by the gate was new, hand-carved by Mr. Aldridge from a fallen oak on the property. The Lena Cole Agricultural Trust. Cultivating futures, preserving roots. I walked through the house. It still smelled like Grandma, like cinnamon and old wood and that particular kind of warmth that only comes from a home that has been truly lived in. Her rocking chair was still on the porch. Her cast-iron skillet was still hanging by the stove. I hadn't changed any of it. I wasn't trying to turn it into a museum. I was trying to keep it alive. Out back, the herb garden was thriving. Rosemary and basil and thyme growing in the meat rows she had taught me to plant when I was 9. The barn had been cleaned out and set up for workshops. The first one, a soil science class for local high schoolers, was scheduled for the following weekend. I walked down to the creek and sat on the flat rock where Grandma and I used to skip stones. The water moved over the rocks in its slow, steady way, the same way it had for 100 years, the same way it would for 100 more. Because no one was going to pave over it. No one was going to drain it for a cul-de-sac. I sat there for a long time. When I got back to the house, there was a small stack of mail on the kitchen table. Bills, a newsletter from the county extension office, and one handwritten envelope. I opened it. Dear Ms. Cole, I am writing to thank you for the scholarship from the Lena Cole Agricultural Trust. I am a sophomore at UT Knoxville studying agricultural sciences. I grew up on a small farm about 20 miles from your grandmother's property, and I have driven past it my whole life. When I was little, my mama used to buy tomatoes from your grandmother at the Saturday market. She always gave me an extra one for free and told me to eat it like an apple. I never forgot that. I am the first person in my family to attend a 4-year university. Without this scholarship, I would not be here. I want you to know that I am studying hard and I plan to come back to this community when I graduate and help other small farms stay alive. Your grandmother's legacy means more to me than I can say. I hope I can make her proud. Sincerely, Amber Dawson. I held that letter and looked out the kitchen window at the hills rolling out toward the horizon. The same view Grandma Lena had looked at every morning of her life while she drank her coffee. And I understood something then, something she had always tried to teach me, that the things worth protecting are never the things that can be bought. They are the things that grow. Slowly, stubbornly, season after season. They are the things you tend with your own hands and pass along not through a bank account, but through a way of living. My mother wanted a payday. She got a lesson. My sister wanted a windfall. She got a mirror. Rick wanted easy money. He got nothing. And Grandma Lena, the woman who raised me when my own mother wouldn't, she got exactly what she planned for. Her land is still here. Her values are still here. Her values are still here. And now, because of a quiet decision she made at a wooden desk in a small room off the kitchen, a girl named Amber Dawson is going to college. That's the inheritance, not the money, the meaning. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in a fireproof safe under a desk, waiting for the right person to find it. Sometimes the loudest thing in the room is the person who says the least. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been the one they counted out, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because quiet doesn't mean weak, it just means we're not done yet.